Caden had always been the kind of person who believed in love above all else. It wasn't that he was naive or impractical, he simply understood the world in a way that most people did not. Where others saw material wealth as the marker of success, Caden saw it as fleeting. For him, true wealth was found in the heart. It was in the way one cared for others, how deeply they could love, and the sacrifices they were willing to make for the people they cherished. For years, Caden had been in love with Haria, a woman whose beauty seemed to shine from the inside out. She had this quiet grace about her, an effortless charm that made her stand out in any room. Aria was kind hearted, intelligent, and had a warmth that drew people in. To Caden, she was everything he ever wanted, yet someone he believed he could never truly have. He knew he wasn't the man who could give her the life she deserved. He wasn't the man with the fancy house, the expensive car, or the financial stability that others could offer. Caden lived in a modest apartment on the edge of town, the kind of place you'd pass by without giving it a second glance. The walls were thin, and the air was often heavy with the smell of old carpet and a faint trace of something lingering from the apartment next door. But in his eyes, it was home. His small space was filled with books he had collected over the years, old furniture that he had salvaged from various places, and framed pictures of happier times. He worked long hours as a mechanic, fixing cars that others often didn't want to bother with. His hands were rough, and his back ached by the end of every day, but it was enough to get by. Every paycheck, he'd put a little aside, hoping one day it would be enough for him to make a difference in his life, and hopefully in Arya's life too. Arya, however, had a different kind of life. She came from a family that was well off, a family that had never known the meaning of struggle. Her father was a successful businessman, and her mother, a woman with high standards, always expected Arya to be with someone who could provide. It wasn't that Arya didn't love Caden. She did, deeply, but there was a constant weight on her shoulders, a pressure from her family that was hard to ignore. Arya's mother, in particular, was vocal about her disapproval of Caden's lifestyle, often suggesting that Arya could do better. But it wasn't just about money for Arya. She loved Caden for his heart, for the way he always made her laugh, for how deeply he cared for the world around him. In his eyes, she could see something no one else had ever truly seen, a love that was unconditional and without expectations. To Arya, that was the most valuable thing anyone could offer. It all started on a spring afternoon when Arya found herself at an auction, searching for a new companion. Her parents had always insisted that she get a dog, and after much deliberation, Arya decided to go. She had been wanting a dog for years, but she was never allowed to have one growing up. Ashia had dreamed of owning a Labrador, a loyal companion who could bring joy to her life, especially after her recent struggles with family expectations. The auction hall was a grand place, filled with wealthy individuals who were bidding for prized dogs, horses, and other luxury items. As Arya wandered through the aisles, her eyes landed on a beautiful K9 Labrador, a dog that seemed to embody everything she had ever wanted. The dog had soulful brown eyes and a coat that glistened under the fluorescent light. It was perfect. For the first time in a long while, Arya felt a glimmer of hope. She could picture herself with that dog, taking walks in the park, coming home after a long day to the warmth of a loyal companion. She didn't need riches to make her happy. All she needed was the love of a good dog, and she would be content. But as the bidding began, Arya realized that this dream was slipping away. The auctioneer's gavel rang through the hall, and other bidders began raising their paddles. The price soared higher and higher, well above what Arya had expected to pay. The dog she had set her heart on was quickly becoming out of reach. As the number climbed, Caden stood quietly in the back of the auction hall, his hands trembling as he gripped his piggy bank. He had no idea how much the dog would cost, but he was determined to give it a try. He didn't have much, but he had a small saving that he had scraped together over the years. It wasn't much compared to the other bidders, but it was all he had, and he was willing to bet everything on it. Caden had watched Aria from a distance for years, seeing her grow into the woman she had become. He knew her well enough to understand how much this dog meant to her, and he couldn't bear the thought of her leaving empty-handed. He had to act. He stepped forward, his heart racing as he prepared to make his bid. The auctioneer's voice echoed in his ears as he placed his bid, his voice shaking with the weight of his decision. He was gambling everything on this one moment, hoping against all odds that he could win Aria the dog she had dreamed of. The auction continued, and with each new bid, Caden felt a little more hopeless. The crowd was full of wealthy bidders who didn't have to worry about a thing. They raised their paddles without hesitation, while Caden's hands began to sweat. His piggy bank felt heavier than it ever had before. Would he be enough? Caden's heart was pounding in his chest as he placed his bid. The auctioneer, standing high on the raised platform, called for another bid, and the price soared even higher. Aria's eyes were fixed on the Labrador, her face filled with hope and longing. But as the bids went up, Caden's own sense of desperation grew. The other bidders seemed so confident, so certain in their wealth. Caden's palms were clammy, and his chest was tight with fear. Was he going to lose this chance? Was the dream he held for Aria slipping away? The Labrador, with his soulful brown eyes and sleek coat, seemed to sense the tension in the room. It sat calmly, staring out at the crowd, as if waiting for the highest bidder to claim it. For Haria, it was more than just a dog. It was a symbol of happiness, of companionship, of a life she had always dreamed of. She knew that this Labrador was the one for her. But as the price continued to rise, Caden realized that his savings, all those small coins he had carefully tucked away over the years, weren't going to be enough. The auction was quickly becoming out of his league, and the more the bids went up, the farther away Aria's dream seemed. And yet he couldn't give up. He couldn't let her live without the dog she so desperately wanted. It was more than just an animal. It was a symbol of hope in a world that had always been hard for both of them. Caden knew that if he could win this dog for Haria, he would give her a piece of happiness she had been longing for. It wasn't about the material world, it was about making her smile, making her feel loved and cared for. As the price climbed higher, the other bidders began to hesitate. Caden could see it in their faces. They were beginning to second guess their willingness to go any further. They were driven by status and wealth, but this was different. Caden's heart was pure. His intentions were selfless. He stepped forward, his throat dry, his voice barely above a whisper as he raised his paddle for one last bid. The room grew quieter, and the other bidders seemed to take a step back, unsure of how to respond. It was as if the entire auction hall held its breath in that single moment. For a few seconds, it felt as though time had stopped. The auctioneer glanced down at Caden, his eyes scanning the room to see if anyone else would dare challenge the bid. No one did. The gavel came down with a sharp crack, and the auctioneer announced that the Labrador was sold. Caden's heart skipped a beat. He had done it. He had won the dog. Aria's dream had come true, and he had played a part in making it happen. Aria, who had been standing to the side, watching the bids, turned toward him in surprise. Her eyes were wide, her lips parted in shock. You, you did it? She asked, her voice trembling. Caden's breath was ragged, his pulse still racing from the intensity of the moment. I did it for you, he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. I know I don't have much, but I wanted you to have the one thing you've always wanted. I didn't want you to leave empty handed. For a moment, there was silence between them. Arya looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Her heart swelled with emotion, but her mind was still trying to process what had just happened. She had never imagined that Caden would go this far, that he would sacrifice everything to give her something so precious. The auctioneer approached them, handing over the papers for the dog. "Congratulations," he said with a nod, his expression professional. "You've won the Labrador. I'm sure it will bring great joy to your life." Caden took the papers, his hand shaking slightly as he handed them to Arya. He felt a mixture of relief and nervousness, relief that he had succeeded in making her happy, and nervousness because he knew that the challenges between them were far from over. Arya reached out, taking the papers from him, and her fingers brushed against his. The touch was electric, sending a rush of warmth through his body. She looked at him, a small genuine smile spreading across her face. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "This means more to me than you know." Caden smiled back, though it was tinged with uncertainty. He had done this for her, yes, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much more to face. The world they lived in wasn't kind to people like him, people who didn't have money, who didn't have the kind of life Arya's family envisioned for her. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had done something right. However, as they exited the building and stood under the bright lights of the parking lot, a voice from behind them stopped them in their tracks. It was Aria's mother standing with her arms crossed, her expression stern and disapproving. "Aria, what are you doing?" her mother demanded. "You're really going to let this man dictate your life? He's nothing more than a mechanic with no future. How could you be so foolish?" Arya stiffened, her body tensing in response to her mother's words. Caden felt a pang of guilt rise within him, but he quickly suppressed it. This wasn't the time to let his insecurities take over. He had made a promise to himself that he would fight for Arya no matter what. "Mom," Arya said, her voice firm but tinged with sadness. "Caden may not have the money or the status that you want from me, but he has something far more important. He has love, and that's more than I could ever ask for." Her mother's face twisted with anger. "Love? Is that all you want, Arya? A life of struggle and poverty? You're better than this. You deserve someone who can give you a future, not someone who will drag you down with him." Arya's eyes narrowed as she stood her ground. "You don't understand, Mom. I don't need someone else's version of happiness. I'm choosing to be with Caden because he makes me feel alive. I love him, and that's enough for me." The silence that followed was heavy, as both mother and daughter stood at an impasse. Caden felt the weight of their disagreement settle over him, but he refused to back down. This wasn't just about the dog, it was about their future together, and he wasn't going to let anyone, not even Arya's mother, tell him that he wasn't good enough for her. Arya's mother let out an exasperated sigh. "I can't believe you're doing this, Arya. But fine, if you want to live in a fantasy, go ahead. But don't come crawling to me when he lets you down." With those words, she turned and walked away, her heel clicking against the pavement as she disappeared into the distance. Caden watched her leave, a bitter taste in his mouth. He didn't want to be the cause of this rift between Arya and her family, but he knew that he couldn't live a life based on anyone else's expectations. Arya turned to him, her face a mix of frustration and determination. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't want you to have to deal with that." Caden shook his head. "You don't have to apologize. I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together, Arya. No matter what happened, we'll figure it out." She smiled, a small, hopeful smile that made his heart swell. He knew that their paths wouldn't be easy, but as long as they had each other, there was nothing they couldn't face. The days following the auction were filled with a mixture of joy and tension. Caden had succeeded in winning the Labrador for Harrier, fulfilling a dream he knew she had cherished for years. The dog quickly became a beloved companion, its presence filling Aria's life with the kind of happiness she hadn't known for a long time. And yet, beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of unease, a quiet tension that seemed to grow with each passing day. As the Labrador lay at her feet, Aria couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude toward Caden. He had given her something so precious, something she had longed for, despite the odds stacked against him. In her heart, she knew she loved him more than anything, but the world around them didn't see the things the way she did. Her family, especially her mother, could not understand the sacrifices Caden had made for her. They couldn't see beyond his lack of wealth, his humble beginning, and the life he led. They didn't understand why she would choose him over a man with money and status. The strain between Harriet and her mother had grown more pronounced ever since the auction. Her mother's disapproval was palpable, and though Arya tried to brush it off, it hurt. The words her mother had spoken that day at the auction echoed in her mind. You deserve someone who can give you a future, not someone who will drag you down with him. Arya couldn't shake the feeling that she was living a double life. On one hand, she had the life she wanted with Caden, full of love and companionship. On the other hand, her family's expectation loomed large, casting a shadow over her every decision. It felt as though she was constantly walking a tightrope, trying to balance the love she had for Caden with the pressure from her family to find someone who could offer her a more traditional life. Her father, though not as vocal as her mother, had also made his disapproval known. He hadn't come out and said it directly, but Arya could see it in his eyes. He wasn't sure if Caden was the right man for her, and that doubt had begun to gnaw at her, feeding her insecurities. Her father had built his life on success and wealth, and while he wasn't as harsh as her mother, he still believed in the importance of stability. In his mind, Caden's lack of financial security was a problem, one that couldn't be ignored. Arya spent more time away from her parents' home, choosing instead to stay with Caden and the dog. But even in the quiet of their little apartment, the tension was still there. It wasn't just the family's judgment, it was the constant worry about the future. What if Arya's family was right? What if Caden couldn't provide the life she had always dreamed of? One evening, as they sat together on the couch, the Labrador curled up at their feet. Arya's thoughts were racing. Caden noticed the faraway look in her eyes and couldn't help but ask, "What's going on, Arya? You've been quiet all evening." Arya sighed, running her fingers through the dog's fur. "I don't know, Caden. I just feel like I'm stuck between two worlds. I love you, I really do. But my family keeps telling me that I'm making a mistake. They think I'm being foolish, choosing you over someone who can actually give me a future." Caden's heart sank. He had known that Arya's family didn't approve of him, but hearing it from her, in her own words, stung more than he had anticipated. "I don't want to come between you and your family," he said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. "I never wanted to put you in this position." Arya shook her head, her expression softening as she reached out to take his hand. "It's not your fault, Caden. It's just that everything feels so complicated. I love being with you, but my parents, they think I'm making a huge mistake. I don't want to disappoint them, but I also don't want to lose you." Caden squeezed her hand, trying to offer her the comfort he knew she needed. "I don't want you to feel like you have to choose, Arya. You don't have to pick between me and them. I'm here for you always. But I can't be the man they want me to be. I can only be the man I am. And I know that's not enough for them." Arya's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away, trying to maintain control. But I want you to be enough for them. I want them to see what I see in you. I don't want them to think that I'm settling for less. Caden leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. You're not settling, Aria. You're choosing me, and that's all that matters. We can't control how others see us, but we can control what's in our hearts, and my heart is with you. For a long time, they sat in silence, the weight of their conversation settling between them. The tension in Aria's chest was palpable, and Caden could feel it too. It wasn't just her family's expectations that were weighing her down, it was the fear of the unknown, the fear of what their future might hold. The next day, Aria decided to visit her parents again. She needed to face them, to hear their thoughts, and to find some closure for herself. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she had to do it. She had to prove to herself that her love for Caden was enough. When she arrived at her parents' house, her mother greeted her with the same coldness she had come to expect. Her father, though quieter, still carried the same look of disapproval. The tension in the room was palpable as Arya sat down at the dining table, the silence stretching between them like an insurmountable wall. Her mother was the first to speak. So, Arya, how's life with your mechanic boyfriend? Her tone was dripping with sarcasm, though there was an undercurrent of genuine concern beneath it. Arya took a deep breath, gathering the strength to respond. Mom, I don't need you to approve of Caden. I don't need you to like him, but I do need you to respect my choices. I love him, and I don't need money or status to make me happy. All I need is him. Her mother's face twisted with frustration. You don't know what you're saying. You're blinded by love, but you're not thinking about your future. You can't live on love alone, Harriet. You need more than that. You need security, stability. Harriet's father, who had been silent up until now, spoke. Your mother's right. You can't build a life on dreams. If you marry him, Arya, you'll be giving up everything. You'll be giving up your chance at a real future. Do you really want that? Arya felt her resolve begin to waver, but she quickly steadied herself. I am thinking about my future, Dad. I'm thinking about it every single day, and my future is with Caden. That's not something I'm going to change just because you think I should. The room fell silent again, and Arya could feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She didn't know if her parents would ever accept Caden, but she knew one thing for certain. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let anyone dictate her life anymore. She loved Caden, and that was enough. The days passed in a blur, and despite the growing tension between Arya and her parents, the bond between her and Caden seemed to only grow stronger. Arya spent every moment she could with him, and the Labrador became a source of solace for both of them. It was the one thing they shared that felt entirely right, a tangible symbol of their love and commitment. Yet, even in the comfort of their small apartment, there was an undeniable undercurrent of stress that neither could ignore. Caden had always been a man of few words, a quiet soul who kept his emotions bottled up, but the pressures of Arya's family, coupled with his own self-doubt, were starting to eat away at him. He could feel the weight of their disapproval in every interaction, every word that came from Arya's mother, and even in the subtle way her father looked at him. He couldn't escape the feeling that he wasn't enough. His humble background, his modest job, none of it seemed to measure up to the expectations Arya's family had for her, even though Arya had chosen him, despite all the sacrifices he had made for her. There were times when he wondered if he truly belonged in her world. One evening, as the two of them sat together on the couch, the Labrador curled up between them, Caden couldn't help but ask the question that had been gnawing at him for weeks. Arya, he said, his voice low and hesitant, do you ever regret choosing me? Arya turned to look at him, surprised by the question. Her eyes softened as she reached for his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Caden, What are you talking about? I've never once regretted it. I love you. You know that. He shook his head, his grip tightening on her hand, as if holding on to something that was slipping away. But what if you're just saying that because you feel sorry for me? What if you're just trying to make the best of it? But deep down, you want more. You deserve more, Aria. You deserve someone who can give you everything your family wants for you. Someone with money, a future, stability. Aria frowned, her heart breaking at the vulnerability in his voice. Caden, I don't want anyone else. You're the one I want. You don't understand, do you? I've never cared about money or status. I care about you. That's all that matters to me. You give me everything I need, and you make me feel loved. What more could I possibly want? But Caden's doubts lingered. He had always been insecure about his lack of wealth, his inability to provide the life that Aria's family had envisioned for her. He was keenly aware of the fact that, to them, he was not good enough. He was just a mechanic, a man who spent his days working on cars and getting his hands dirty. He didn't have a high powered career or a prestigious title, just a quiet, hard working life that kept him grounded. But would that ever be enough for Haria? Haria could see the conflict in his eyes, the way he wrestled with his own insecurities. She reached out to cup his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Caden, she said softly, stop doubting yourself. You are more than enough. I'm not looking for someone to give me everything. What I need is someone who loves me, who supports me, who will stand by me no matter what. And that's you. Her words were soothing, but they couldn't erase the deep-rooted fears that lingered in his heart. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that he was enough for her. But the constant pressure from her family, the disapproving looks, the whisper behind her back, it all felt like too much to bear. Caden spent more and more time in the garage, pouring himself into his work as a way to escape the nagging doubts that followed him everywhere. He worked late into the night, his hands sore from hours of fixing cars, his mind consumed by the fear that Aria might one day realize that she deserved more than what he could offer. Aria noticed the change in him, the way he withdrew more and more into himself. She could see the toll it was taking on him, the way the stress was wearing him down. But every time she tried to talk to him about it, he would push her away, insisting that he was fine. I'm just tired, Aria. Don't worry about me, he would say, his voice gruff as he buried himself in his work. But Aria couldn't ignore the signs. She knew something was wrong, and it broke her heart to see Caden shutting her out. She had tried everything to reassure him, to make him see that he was enough, but it felt like no matter what she said, it didn't reach him. One afternoon, as she walked through the door of their apartment, she was met with an unexpected sight. Caden was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, his hands resting on his lap. The Labrador was at his feet, looking up at him with curious eyes. There was something in Caden's posture, something defeated, that made Aria's heart ache. Caden, she asked softly, stepping closer to him. He didn't respond at first, and for a moment Aria wondered if he had heard her. But then, slowly, he looked up at her, his eyes tired and filled with a kind of sadness she had never seen before. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this, Aria, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how much longer I can pretend to be the man you need. I'm failing you. I'm not the man your family wants for you. I'm not the man I want to be. Adria felt a lump form in her throat as she knelt beside him, a hand resting gently on his arm. Caden, you're not failing me. You're everything I need. I don't care what my family wants or what anyone else thinks. All I care about is you. You're the man I've chosen, and I don't need anything else. But even as she said the words, Aria couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fear. The fear that she couldn't fix the broken parts of Caden's heart, The fear that no matter how hard she tried, the pressure of her family's expectations would tear them apart. In the silence that followed, both of them sat there, lost in their thoughts. Arya could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, and she knew that this wasn't going to be easy. But she also knew that she couldn't walk away. She couldn't leave Caden to fight these demons alone. I'm here for you, Caden, she whispered. I will always be here for you, no matter what. Caden's eyes met hers, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe her. He leaned in, pressing his forehead to hers, his breath shaky but steadying with the reassurance of her love. Thank you, Arya, he whispered. Thank you for loving me. And in that moment, as the world outside continued to spin, they found comfort in each other's arms, a fleeting sense of peace in the midst of their struggles. They both knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they were ready to face it together. No matter what came their way, they had each other, and that was all they needed. The days after the heart to heart had changed something in both Caden and Arya. For Caden, it was the first time he truly allowed himself to believe that Arya's love for him wasn't just a consolation, that it was real and enough. He still had moments of doubt, moments when he questioned his worth, but those moments became fewer as Arya's unwavering belief in him kept him grounded. For Arya, the weight of her family's expectations continued to loom over her, but she had finally come to terms with something fundamental. She had made a choice. She didn't need her family's approval to live her life, and she didn't need anyone to tell her what she deserved. She had Caden, and in her heart, that was all she needed. Yet, despite this newfound clarity, the pressures from Arya's family didn't ease. They were relentless in their pursuit of convincing her that she had made a mistake. Her mother's disapproving words echoed in her mind, even as she went about her daily routine with Caden. She could feel her mother's gaze, as if scrutinizing every moment of her life, waiting for her to falter, waiting for her to come to her senses and walk away from Caden. One evening, after a particularly heated conversation with her mother, Arya returned home, exhausted and emotionally drained. She found Caden in their small living room, sitting on the couch with the Labrador at his feet. The sight of him, his calm demeanor and quiet strength, reminded her of why she had chosen him in the first place. I can't do this anymore, Caden, Arya said softly, her voice thick with emotion. I can't keep fighting with my family. I don't know how much longer I can take the pressure. Caden stood up, crossing the room to stand in front of her. His eyes filled with concern, searched her face. Arya, you don't have to do this alone. We don't have to keep living in the shadow of your family's expectation. If it's too much, we'll figure something out, but you don't have to bear this weight by yourself. She looked at him, the love in her eyes unmistakable. It's not just them, Caden, it's me too. I love you. I truly do. But I can't keep wondering if I'm making a mistake. I want to build a future with you, but I can't keep fighting against my own doubts. Caden took her hands in his grip firm but gentle. Ashia, I don't want to be the source of your doubt. I want to be the one who makes you feel sure about everything. But I can't change your family's mind, and I can't change the way the world sees us. All I can offer is my love, and I want to be with you, no matter what. Arya felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had needed to hear those words more than she had realized. For so long, she had carried the weight of both her family's expectations and her own fears. But Caden was right. No matter what happened, they had each other, and that, she realized, was the most important thing. I don't want to lose you, she whispered, her voice trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. But I'm scared that I'm making the wrong choice. What if this doesn't work out? What if my family was right? What if I'm just fooling myself? Caden gently wiped a tear from her cheek, his expression softening. Ashia, you're not fooling yourself. You're choosing love. You're choosing a life with me. And that's enough. We don't need to know what the future holds. We only need to know that we're in it together. The words hung in the air between them, their meaning settling deep into Aria's heart. She had spent so long worrying about the future, about what everyone else thought, that she had almost lost sight of what truly mattered. What truly mattered was the love they shared. That was something no amount of wealth or status could replace. I'm scared too, Caden admitted, his voice raw with honesty. I'm scared that I'm not enough for you, that I can't give you the life you deserve. But if you're willing to fight with me, I'll fight too. I'll fight for us, for our future. Arya took a deep breath, her heart swelling with the realization that the only future she wanted was one with him. I'm not giving up on us, Caden, she said, her voice steady with determination. I'm not going to let anyone, not even my family, tell me what I should do. I'm going to build my future with you, and we'll face whatever comes together. A smile tugged at the corners of Caden's lips as he pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, as if to reassure both of them that this was the beginning of something new. Over the next few weeks, Arya made the difficult decision to distance herself from her family. She knew they would never fully accept Caden, but that no longer mattered. She was no longer going to let their opinion dictate her happiness. She called her mother and told her that she needed space to figure things out on her own. It was a decision that weighed heavily on her, but in the end, it was the right one. She and Caden continued to build their life together, slowly but surely. They didn't have the lavish lifestyle our family had hoped for, but they had something much more valuable: each other. The challenges they faced were far from over. Caden still had his insecurities, and Arya still struggled with the pressure from her family. But they learned to lean on each other, to face the world together. With each passing day, their love grew stronger, and they realized that they were enough, not because of what they had or didn't have, but because they had chosen each other. As the months went by, Arya found herself more at peace with her decision. She was finally able to let go of the fear, the doubt, and the pressure. She had built a life with Caden, one that was real, raw, and full of love, and in the end, that was all that mattered. On their first anniversary together, Ahia and Caden stood on the rooftop of their apartment building, looking out at the city lights below. The Labrador, now fully grown, sat happily at their feet, as if to remind them that even in the toughest times, they had each other. Happy anniversary, Aria, Caden said, his voice warm as he turned to her. She smiled up at him, her heart full. Happy anniversary, Caden. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for fighting for us. Caden took her hand and kissed her gently, the city light shining brightly around them. No matter what the future held, they knew they had something priceless: the love they shared and the strength to face whatever came next.